All right, here we go. So first, we're going to do introductions. All right, so I am Paul Bender, the CEO of Greater Than Games. We're a tabletop publishing company that's been in business since 2011, beginning of 2011, and we have grown quite a bit since then. We've always, from the beginning, done our own warehousing and shipping and fulfillment, which is a little bit unusual. And so given the lessons we learned there, we have a kind of a very intimate, close to the logistics problem understanding of shipping that a lot of publishers don't necessarily run into, especially when they're smaller. Anyway, we're the publishers. We publish games like Sentinels of the Multiverse, Spirit Island, a number of other games. And we've always...
Medium.
Yeah, Medium.
Very
Came out here, yeah.
I've never shipped any of that.
That's true. So...
We shipped it here.
Yeah, we shipped it here.
Put it in my car.
Yeah, that's great. So we have that's experience. We do Kickstarter fulfillment. We do a lot of importing. We do overseas manufacturing in China, etc.
I'm Jodie Wagner. I'm the warehouse manager at Greater Than Games. I was brought to Greater Than Games just to ship, and I've learned a lot since I started doing that.
And by to ship, Jodie means like imagining two fictional characters in a relationship that isn't real, and then writing about it on Reddit.
Lots of kissing.
Yeah.
I am Matt Kroll. I am inventory manager and project manager for conventions because that's also shipping and lots of logistics.
Yeah, so as a quick overview before we go to Q&A. So what do we do and what are we talking about when you might hear some words? So on the broad high level, any sort of shipping or moving of physical goods around either the country or the globe roughly falls into two categories. There's parcels and there's freight, right? Parcels are smaller and freight is larger, is the kind of the two broad categories. And then within those, there are a variety of subcategories you might hear. So on the parcel side, it goes all the way down to small envelopes that might be carried by the United States Postal Service or other postal carriers, all the way up to boxes that are quite large. And the cutoff for what counts as a parcel is basically what in the US a company like FedEx or UPS would accept. What is that roughly?
They usually cut you off around 150 pounds.
Right.
They say if something's over 150 pounds, or they have like a dimensions thing where they say if it's over a certain size, like I shipped a assembled bicycle one time, that was considered freight.
Yeah. And then freight is anything that is that size or larger, although realistically you can package something that's down to about 100 pounds as freight. So there's a little bit of overlap on the high side of parcel and the low side of freight. But freight, it depends on the way that it's shipped and the different trucks and carriers that handle it. But freight will start out there right around 100 pounds of palletized cargo and go all the way up to, and then to one or multiple pallets, usually capping around 6 pallets, is what they call LTL freight, which means less than load. And LTL freight functions in the shipping networks the same way that parcels will. So parcels and LTL freight all function sort of the same way, which is that you or whoever is shipping the parcels or whoever is shipping the LTL freight all gives it to a carrier that takes it to a hub in whatever local city or region you're in. Then once all of the parcels or all of the LTL freight is at that hub, they then sort it out for long haul between cities, depending on where it's going. And that can be long haul within the US, that can be international long haul, maybe they put it on an airplane and fly it to Europe or fly it to Asia, etc. And then once it gets in the hub in the destination city, then they'll unload it in that hub, sort it out for specific delivery routes, and put it on trucks that are going to drive around those delivery routes. So if you think about the United States Postal Service works like this, right? You put an envelope in your mailbox, then they take it to your local post office. That post office sorts it out, so these ones are going to this city, this one's this city, this one's this city. They overnight or something take all of the envelopes to that other city and then sort them out there again and by zip code, right? And LTL freight works like that too. So you have up to 6 pallets. They go in a truck, and so a truck will do a pickup route. It'll come by your warehouse, pick up your 1 to 6 pallets, go to someone of board games presumably, go to someone else's warehouse, pick up their 1 to 6 pallets of nuts and bolts, go to another place and pick up their baseball hats, right? And they'll take them all to the hub in your local city, sort them out in that same kind of way. So that's LTL freight, less than load.
And like companies define LTL usually based on the number of feet it takes up in a trailer. Mm-hmm. Pallets are about a 4 foot square. And so most companies say if you take up more than 16 feet of trailer space in a row, it's considered bigger than an LTL shipment. Some do as low as 12, some do more than that, but not many, I don't think.
Yeah.
So if you have long pipes or some giant statue that you can lay on its back,
then it will stop.
It's definitely going to be some sort of specialized freight.
Yeah, exactly. Once you get above LTL, like I said, a weird specialized freight that is often annoying to deal with. It's either an expensive as well. So it'll either be a partial load if you can only get like more than 16 feet, but it doesn't take up a whole trailer, and that's kind of bespoke, and
They'll make you a deal, and it'll sound shady, and it is, and they are making it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're looking to fill truck space. They know they're going to run the truck, and
Because the most expensive part of the shipping is the truck and the driver and the gas.
Yeah.
It's the actually getting it from from one place to another place.
But like if we were all three different companies, they already promised Matt and Paul they were going to do a pallet each, and then I'm like, well, I've got 20 pallets. Can you ship those? And they're like, yeah, we'll just throw it in with those 2 pallets. That was our whole truck before.
And they're all kind of going the same region or whatever, or those single pallets are at the back, so they'll go after, and then a single driver will go to those 3 destinations.
Right, and then beyond that, you'll have full load, which takes up a whole trailer, or basically a whole trailer. And the reason why those are expensive and strange is because they don't go through that hub kind of system. They're so big that they have to be a bespoke delivery. So they'll come, we're based in St. Louis, Missouri, and if we want to ship a load this big to somewhere in Michigan or something like that, they will come by, a driver will pick it up from our warehouse and then just drive to Michigan, right? And so there aren't those handoffs. So the upside of that is that when people are moving your stuff less, and it's less likely to get damaged. But on the other hand,
it gets there faster too.
It gets there faster. But you run into strange problems of either availability or pricing, or both, depending on the whims of fate.
We
and
know
the fact that those are over-the-road drivers, and they're not as good at backing up trucks as
oh wow, they're really not.
as city drivers are.
So it turns out that the worst job, if you're a trucker, is that job. The job where you have to be away from home all the time and do long haul. The best job, if you're a truck driver, is the job where you're doing those pickups. You do a route, you pick up and drop off at your local hub, and then you go to sleep in your own bed, and you do the same thing the next day.
And best is relative, because that's not necessarily where you make the most money.
Right.
But that's where you get to like be mentally healthy and have a family and
Right,
not
exactly.
Major caffeine addiction.
So,
Caffeine addiction.
so for the most part, we find that the most skilled drivers are doing that. And the more skilled challenge drivers tend to be the long haul ones.
Yeah, because they're really good at going in a straight line down Route 70 forever.
The reality of it is it's pretty easy to just go in a straight line, and interstates are built for that.
Yeah.
And so they're very forgiving of, oh, you drifted a little bit. Okay, get back into your lane. But city drivers have to deal with backing up. They back up their truck more than they drive forward, like time-wise,
Absolutely.
on any given day. So,
Whereas the long haul drivers rarely back up their truck, and when they do, sometimes exciting things happen.
Yeah, like you have less walls. Not a lie. Fun story that we're not going to tell.
And then when you get a little bit bigger than that, or are going a little bit farther than that, when we do imports internationally, then we get into, it's full loads, but what we're dealing with then is what's called intermodal freight. So intermodal freight is innovation in the last several decades that has just kind of revolutionized moving stuff all around the globe, which is where stuff goes in cargo containers. So you've certainly seen cargo containers, whether you realize it or not, at one time or another. Cargo containers are big metal boxes that are usually 40 feet long and can sit on the back of a truck, but there are cargo containers that are 20 feet long, and then there are cargo containers that are 53 feet long.
you'll recognize them because they're corrugated.
Yeah, the corrugated metal boxes, and you have probably seen them on the back of truck chassis being pulled like another by a tractor. You've probably seen them on a train, and if you live near the ocean in a big port, you've seen them on a ship. And so the great thing about cargo containers is that they're intermodal, so they can be transferred using all those modes of transportation. So when we print board games in China, the factory will load up a cargo container full of board games and bolt it shut. And then they will take that cargo container and put it on a truck chassis and drive it from the factory to the port of Shenzhen in China, for example. Then a crane will take it off the truck chassis and put it in a pile. When there's a ship ready, they'll load it on a big container ship. That container ship will take that container of our products plus hundreds of other containers across the Pacific Ocean.
Most of them will get there.
Hopefully none of them fall in the Pacific Ocean. Sometimes some of them do. That's never happened to ours. That's why we have insurance. It's fine. Then that'll get into the port of Long Beach or the port of Los Angeles or the port of Tacoma, something like that. And that will be unloaded by a crane there and put on rail. And then we're in St. Louis, Missouri, which is fantastic because all of the rail lines that go from the West Coast come to St. Louis and terminate there. So we can bring stuff in rail right from Long Beach, Los Angeles, Tacoma, directly to St. Louis. There's a local rail yard in St. Louis where they've got cranes and they unload those trains, stack all the containers in a pile until someone's ready with a truck chassis, comes and gets it, they load it on the truck chassis, they drive it to our warehouse. And only then do we cut the bolt on the container and look at what's inside. So it's been sealed that whole time. No one has actually no one touches the actual parcels or the actual freight except for the factory and us.
It's been penetrated by so much dust. You can't breathe when you're unloading it.
Occasionally it's been penetrated by a small amount of seawater.
Yes,
And then they're
occasionally.
squishy.
That was just because there was no floor in that one.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, so that's intermodal freight, which is really great. So that's commoditized and quite inexpensive.
There's a security measure in there, and that we get the number of the seal, and so we know.
Yeah, they're all serialized.
So we know if anyone else has opened it because you can't just make seals.
You can't make new ones.
Right.
This is also why when
Kind of
everybody's
bulk
waiting on their stuff to get from a Kickstarter and somebody goes, "It's done printing," and everybody goes, "Cool, where is it?" No. You've got like 2 more months probably, depending on where they are. Because we are very conveniently located for rail, but if you're in Wisconsin, it's probably real terrible for rail.
Yeah.
Like it's going to come to St. Louis and then sit in a yard until there's a truck chassis that wants to do a long haul up there, maybe, but it might go on a truck chassis and go there to another yard before there's a local delivery. Like, yeah, being done printed is like, oh, nice. I'll see it next quarter.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and the reason why that's true is because of just the nuances of how the U.S. rail system is set up. So basically, for weird historical reasons, all the rail lines go from the West Coast to the Mississippi, or from the East Coast to the Mississippi, or up and down the Mississippi, and that's it. And so switching rail carriers, switching companies is very expensive and is rarely done unless you're going completely across the U.S., and then they'll switch in like Chicago or St. Louis. If you don't live there, if you're wanting to go to Atlanta, but something is coming in from the West Coast, it'll go to a city on the Mississippi. Either, if it's to Atlanta, it'll probably either go to St. Louis or Memphis. And then they'll unload it there, and then usually put it on a truck, and then a long haul carrier will bring it in, which means that it is a bit more expensive, it takes longer. Right?
It takes a lot longer.
And it's a little more expensive too because you have to pay for the chassis that carry those containers.
Yeah.
Things like that.
And the other downside of that, really is upside for us. Since all of our truck deliveries of those containers are local, that means that if we're getting a dozen cargo containers in, we can unload them as fast as possible and then call them and say, bring the next one when we're ready, and that accelerates that. Whereas you don't have that option if they've got a 20-hour drive.
What was our max in a day? How many containers have we unloaded in a day?
I thought it was 4 or 5.
I think it's 5 or 6. But anyway, an average container has 42 to 44 pallets on it, full pallets, for a 40-foot high cube. So they vary in height slightly. And we've done 200 plus pallets in a day out of a container. And I believe that same day was the day that we did 80 plus pallets out of our warehouse into trucks to FedEx. Yep. So, and that was when it was you and I.
Yeah.
And that was it.
That was just Matt and I.
So, it was a long day.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that is a rough overview of that kind of shipping thing. The only other thing I wanted to mention before we go to the Q&A part is talking about taxes and import duties, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about this that come up, and in particular when you're dealing with small customers that are selling internationally through Kickstarter. Yeah.
Before you do that, we should do that there. You mentioned containers and that they're full containers. You can also do less than full containers.
Yeah, and basically it becomes an LTL load in a container.
And those get damaged a lot because people are handling them a lot more.
Yeah.
They break that seal when it gets to the U.S. and then they drive it to one place and they whatever.
Yeah, that's right. This is a situation where, say, you print a very small amount of games in China, and you maybe only have 3 pallets, and that's not even enough for a 20-foot container. And so you'll do a shared container effectively, like a broker will handle that. It's easy to set up. The trouble is, the reason why there's a lot of damages is because they'll bring the 20 or 40-foot container that your stuff is in with other people's stuff. They'll bring it to a rail yard somewhere, and they will cut the bolt open there and unload the whole container with forklifts, and then put your pallets on a truck to be delivered to you wherever you are. The trouble is those yards where they do that have a ton of freight sitting out and a ton of people driving forklifts at 20 miles an hour.
And they're always backlogged.
Yeah.
Like, they're always behind on what they're doing.
And so driving forklifts into your freight is a thing that it happens like shockingly frequently when you do that. Like, I don't think we've ever not had
It's
egregious
almost
damages.
20% of every. It's probably about 20% of the pallets we've received have had some damage.
That way.
That way.
If you ever
It's not everything on the pallet. It's 1 or 2 games on the pallet.
Right, because if you
usually.
drive into a pallet 20 miles an hour with a forklift, it's only the layer that gets speared right in the middle that's ruined. The stuff above is maybe
It's
fine.
fine. And if you ever are driving down the road and you see a container on a chassis and it's no longer corrugated in one small spot, that's where a forklift definitely hit it for sure. That's a fun way to see how old a container is. That's too old and you should throw it away. That happened on that trip, probably.
Yeah.
You were talking about
Yeah,
that.
totally right. Okay, so customs duties and VAT and like that. So the situation where this comes up the most often is Europe. Most common thing for board games. So as I can specifically speak to Europe. So in Europe, if you are shipping a product, if you sell a product, Kickstarter is the best use case here, but a web store also works. Say you sell a product on Kickstarter or on your web store for a particular price. Europe has Europe-wide what's called value-added tax, which is a tax on the sale price of a good to someone in Europe. And for most goods, it's very high. It is in the 15 to 25% range of the actual sale price. So that means
including shipping.
yes, and it includes anything that you charged for shipping. So if you have a $40 board game, like on Kickstarter, you're like, it's a $60 game, but on Kickstarter, I'm gonna sell it for $40 and then charge people $10 shipping for Europe, so that you charge them $50 total. Great, when you ship that into Europe, you are going to get charged a VAT of 20 to 25% of that $50 on top of that $50 that you will have to pay, right? And things that you can do, sneaky things that get you around this, are illegal and customs fraud. So saying that something is a gift, saying that the sale price is the manufacturing cost or the wholesale price, those are all customs fraud. And if you get caught by Europe, then you will be in a lot of trouble by Europe and maybe not be able to import into Europe.
I used to work for a $1 billion pharmaceutical company, and we had to have a very strong discussion about how the $1 billion pharmaceutical company, when customs fraud is committed, is not liable. The person that signed the paperwork is liable. You are liable. If you sign that paperwork and say, this is the price of a thing, you are the one that gets the $500,000 fine. And it is a $500,000 fine, and it can be jail time.
Yeah, so that's a good way to...
Super duper illegal. It's an incredible way to lose your house for sure, possibly go to jail for like 2 years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of misunderstandings about this, and in the last 2 years, the European Union has been cracking down on this a lot, and has been a lot more aggressive because they've realized that like everyone is like, oh yeah, customs fraud, and so they're losing out on a lot of money, and so it's really extreme, and like
And some countries are more forceful with it than others.
yeah, exactly, and so it's don't mess around with it. Like you can get away with it for a while, but don't.
Right, like the chances of you getting caught are low because a lot of people are doing it.
Yeah.
But if you get caught, that's it. You're
Yeah.
done. You are done. You are financially ruined. Not your company. You are financially ruined, probably forever.
Yeah.
I don't know a single person in the board game industry that can be like, here's a $500,000. It's cool. Also, I'm in jail for 2 years.
No problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And European backers used to be really like there's a minority of very vocal people for Kickstarter backers that like insist that this is not true. Go from Europe because they don't like it.
They're
but
lying.
It is true.
They're
And so people have like slowly figured it out. And we started about a year and a half ago posting this massive multi-thousand word write-up explaining this.
This is why
everywhere on a
everything costs what it
Kickstarter
costs.
campaign that we run. We still have very successful Kickstarter campaigns, and after the first 1 or 2 of those, we stopped getting complaints from backers. I think because the complaining is people stop backing, get a good riddance. And second, we got a lot of thanks from European companies, being like, oh man, thank you so much for saying that. Now I can just point people to this. Like, look, all these successful campaigns didn't break the law, just don't break the law. So.
Additionally, I've had a number of people come to us and be like, hey, how are you getting board games into Germany? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, German customs always flags our games.
It's like, oh, you didn't fill out your paperwork right.
I was like, well, they're
that
real stickers
stereotype
for
is
this.
there for a reason. They are very strict.
And like,
And our stuff does get flagged occasionally.
It
like
does
all of our
occasionally.
returns in Europe are German or Dutch.
But like a lot
Because
of
like, oh, you forgot to dot an I, send it back.
a lot of
Goodbye.
companies are having this problem where they're sending things to Europe and they're getting returned because of the customs paperwork.
Ooh, the fun.
Either because they don't believe it and said, "Oh, this isn't worth our time," and threw it, sent it back, or because the paperwork was filled out wrong.
So we have like really good rates to a lot of European countries. We have really good shipping rates everywhere because we do it a lot. And the more you ship, the lower your rates are. When it goes someplace and then gets returned to you, you don't get your shipping rates back. You get anyone off the street shipping rates back.
The list price.
And we usually just go, just throw in the garbage, I'll send another one. Like, it will cost us more than just sending another
It is
game.
not worth it for this $40 game to pay $60 in shipping charges again.
And then have to ship it again. And
Right.
it's definitely damaged when it gets back. So you're just throwing it in the garbage. So, yeah. Dot your I's and cross your T's on every bit of paperwork because Europe is fun.
Yeah. The nice thing is there are companies that will do fulfillment in Europe for you, the individual parcels. You still have to pay VAT when you get it imported to Europe. So if you sell a bunch of stuff on Kickstarter, you say like, I sell 200 things to Europe and I'm going to have a company fulfill everything in Europe. Awesome. Definitely do that. They'll do all the paperwork and make sure it's right. But when you're charging your backers for stuff, you still have to keep in mind, like, you still have to pay VAT on the price you sold it for on Kickstarter, right? So that 20, 25%, whatever that is, you're going to have to pay that still when you import it to Europe. And in fact, using one of those fulfillment companies, if they're good, they will like insist even more that you do because they don't want to get on the hook because they're in Europe and they don't want to get in trouble by facilitating the commitment of customs fraud. But once you handle that, then they can handle a lot of this other paperwork, busy work, which is nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of parcel consolidators out there that will do awesome work for you, and chances are they are going to charge you less than you, like a person who doesn't constantly ship to Europe is going to have to pay for shipping anyway.
Yeah.
Like it usually winds up being the same or slightly better deal, but like any amount of reshipping is worth spending a little bit of extra money because A, you're not losing customers by making them very mad, and B, you're not paying an arm and a leg to ship a box of broken cardboard back to you, which is fun.
Yeah.
And it is possible, it's the thing we've done, to charge the customers VAT and then pay it on their behalf.
Yeah. And that's what we typically do on a Kickstarter campaign. So, and we'll usually break it out even. We'll be like, well, if you live in Europe in particular, like, here's the amount I'm charging you for shipping. I'll put that on the Kickstarter, and then they'll pay that. And then I'll use a pledge manager often, and we'll explain this all in the campaign before the campaign ends. And then during the pledge manager, you're going to be charged VAT, which will be on the price you paid plus the shipping you paid. So you have to add money in there. And the reason we separate it out like that is because legally in Europe, you have to charge VAT based on not only the cost of the good, but the amount you charge your customer for shipping. And we don't want to bundle VAT and an amount we're charging them for shipping together and then have some bureaucrat in Europe be like, but you charge this amount. And so we don't want to get charged VAT on VAT, if that makes sense. So we separate them out so that we can...
It becomes a sweet infinity shot.
Exactly.
Hey, infinity VAT.
It would be like
to a penny, but it stays in a penny forever.
An asymptote, right? It would be like this. Anyway, but it's not. We don't want to do that. So, so that's how we handle that particular thing, and then we'll collect the VAT on that part, and then we have it, and then we pay
And then
it.
we have our carrier pay it when they bring it into the country.
It often means that you're paying a more accurate VAT as well because it's closer to the time that you're fulfilling, and VAT is subject to change whenever.
Yeah.
Whenever. It can just change.
Yeah.
So.
Any other particular like high-level topics before we do questions?
No, I don't
No,
think
I'm
so.
Nope. We burned half of that. Cool. Perfect.
Inbound is a harder thing in general to coordinate than outbound because you're relying on other companies to do stuff.
Yeah, inbound is really hard.
What questions do you have?
Somebody's
if
got
any?
questions. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
I'll start off with the fun one. Have you guys gotten hit yet by import tariffs from China?
No, because the customs codes that we import under aren't subject to tariffs yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that.
Are you guys on the list? Because I know they just started to announce another round.
Yes, they just announced another round. So they announced a round like 3 months ago that we were on, and then they said just kidding, and then they said it yes again.
Like
so
on Thursday, they were like, but we're going to do it again.
it's freaking unknowable. Like
It's unknowable and it's posturing, hopefully, because it will be bad.
That's how I feel about
it's
it.
bad for everyone, and we get nothing out of it.
Yeah.
Like nobody gets anything out of it.
If they do, is it gonna change the calculus on China?
Probably not for most things.
But it will change the retail cost of games.
Yeah, that's what it will
Pretty
change.
It is a thing that is going to be passed on to the consumer for most companies.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
there's really no other way to deal with it other than, okay, there's a 25% tax.
Yeah.
The price of games goes up by 25%.
Yeah.
Because the industry has shown that it is totally fine paying way too much money for board games, but also that they have an endless thirst for them. And like, everyone's price is going to go up at the same time. Like, once that tariff goes through, whatever that means, because it is also weird and nebulous because none of it's actually laid out into like real codified anything.
Yeah.
Like, it could be stuff that was manufactured or was shipping is exempt. There's going to be a day if that tariff goes through where all board games just bump up that cost.
Because there's some things you can manufacture just great in the U.S., but for most things, it's not a cost issue. It is for really high-end board games, really high-end cardboard die cuts, really high-end like miniatures, anything like that. The supply chain doesn't exist in the U.S., so there's not an option. Like you can't get games like that. Like we manufacture some stuff in the U.S. Like you can get books real nice. You can get cheaper games, right? Like it's a lower weight. If it doesn't matter that the box is a little bit flimsy and you don't have really complex cuts for dies or anything like that, there's no problem in the U.S.
we make playing cards in the US?
Like a large format single fold, like a coffin box game, like a Chutes and Ladders, whatever like that. Totally manufacturable in the United States because nobody expects that box to last very long, and nothing about it is complicated inside.
Yeah.
Because every token is going to be a square or a circle of a size, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. But yeah, you want your nice die cut.
And the really heavy.
One of the irritating things about shipping board games is that if you're just shipping like a box of cereal and the box gets destroyed, it's a little bit irritating and whatever, throw the box away and just hold on to the bag of cereal. The board games don't work that way. People want those board games on their shelves to display them to people. It's part of the product.
It's also
not
becoming
just packaging.
It's also becoming, in addition to a hobby industry, it's a collectible industry, and that is like people want a pristine box on their shelf. They want it's part of their collection. Their shelves are display cases. They don't go in drawers or closets anymore. They are in people's living rooms. So they want it to look good. People are proud of their collections. And you can't do that.
Yeah.
Cardboard manufacturing in the United States, we literally don't have the industry for it.
Right.
If we wanted to, if the United States had a concerted effort that we were like, we're going to start doing this, you estimated, 25 years before we could possibly get the machinery here. Not the skills or...
We want nice boxes because they sell games, and people want nice boxes because they display them. But there's a reason nice boxes are made, and they're made in China.
It's because that's the actual industry that wants nice boxes.
Yep.
And it's way, 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 way bigger by orders of magnitude than the tabletop board game industry. So if you think about your iPhone or your Android phone or your Samsung laptop and the box that comes in and how glorious and majestic it is.
Yeah, how much bubble wrap was in there? Was it none?
Yeah.
Because that's die-cut cardboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our whole industry basically piggybacks on the excess capacity of factories that are making boxes for iPhones and laptops.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So that's why.
The thing you throw away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why all the tooling and skills are there.
You've seen a super awesome laptop box, and it's got, it's got matte finish and gloss finish, and it's got UV and this, and you pop it open, and you're like, cool, throw it away. That's the thing we make. Like, that's this entire industry,
Right.
as a whole.
Yeah. So even if you were like, I'm going to invest all the money to bring all these machines and train all these people and set up a factory to make board games in the United States somewhere.
How are you going to get the
you're not
metals that literally only exist in China that make this process work?
Right. Like even if you captured 90% of the U.S. tabletop board gaming market, you're going to be real hard pressed to make back your investment. You're not gonna, because the actual big market for that, like we're so much smaller than the actual big market for that. So that's kind of the problem.
We are a pittance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommended level of overproduction in order to deal with typical shipping issues?
That really depends on where you're shipping a thing. Like, if it's coming from China and from a reputable company, then you're going to have a lot less damages than if you get something we have less damages shipping from China than we do shipping things in the United States.
Yeah.
It depends on the boxes your games are in. It depends on how well you pack them.
Yeah.
We recently acquired Cheap Ass Games, and a lot of their games are in
cheap
very,
boxes.
very flimsy cardboard boxes.
Right.
And there's been a higher percentage of damage on those than anything we've ever shipped before.
Yeah.
Well, part of this is too, so like when we import from China, if we manufacture stuff in China and we import a full cargo container, like we said, our damage rate is minuscule. Like almost everything comes in
It's
prestige.
significantly less than 1%.
Exactly.
We actually don't see damages
Like
per container anymore.
Yeah, realistically, there is like less than one
It's-
damage per container.
We are more likely to damage things unloading that container than damages happening
Yeah,
in the
right.
shipping process.
Unless something was like ruined, or they could have done the printing wrong. Their QC could have been bad, but that's the factory's
Whatever
issue.
could you be talking about?
When we ship out games then in parcels from our warehouse, like individual, like web store orders or a Kickstarter fulfillment, our damage rate is like 1 to 5% for damages and loss.
Yeah.
Basically. So that's kind of a safe somewhere in there. If you estimate 5%, then you'll probably come in under that unless you unless you package it wrong.
Most of those, for the way we pack, are things that like a person didn't give you their apartment number and didn't get delivered.
Yeah.
And then the return is always hard. Those boxes do great for the way there. Way back, they almost never make it.
Yeah, because they usually get processed 3 or 4 times. They attempt delivery 3 or 4 times, and postal carriers and FedEx carriers and UPS carriers are all overworked, and they throw boxes.
And the third time they walk back from somebody's house and go, well, I don't know what to do here. They drop it, they kick it against the wall of their truck, and they go on with their day.
Yeah.
But when you're to like speak of the last thing you said, when you're shipping freight of games, how we'll do is the games will come maybe 6 or 12 or something like that per outer carton. So it'll be a corrugated cardboard carton that holds the games, right? And that's how they'll typically show up from the factory. And that outer carton is there to keep your nice game box safe, right? And so when we ship freight to a wholesaler, we will pack up those outer cartons, a bunch of cartons, on a pallet and then ship that pallet, right? So we're always shipping palletized cartons of games, so that helps hold the damages down because there's corrugated cardboard that we don't really care about protecting them. The reason why our shipping rate, specifically what Jodie is talking about with Cheap-Ass Games, for example, this also goes to manufacturing locations. So a lot of their games are manufactured in North America, which is great, and the games themselves turn out just fine because of the kinds of games they are. The trouble is that the other problem you run into when you don't manufacture in China, and this is true whether it's North America or Europe, is that in North America and Europe, they use standard-sized cartons that are single-wall corrugated cardboard as cases for those games, which are really, really flimsy compared to the factory in China. The factories in China are big enough; they make custom-sized boxes, double or triple wall thick.
For you.
Yeah,
like,
for your game.
Specifically for your game, because the cost of them having to ship something because they screwed it up is super high, so why not just do it right the first time?
And they have a factory right there.
That's also a pretty good indicator of the quality of a manufacturer. Like if you get samples, if you are shopping around for a manufacturer, and you go, okay, send me a box of your games. And they'll send you a bunch of stuff in languages they don't sell a bunch and stuff like that. They'll sell you like localizations and weird stuff like that, so you're not like a game store stealing games for stuff. And look at the way it comes packaged. Like if they go, okay, we're going to send you a case with all of these same size boxes in it, packed really nicely, and there's one weird one, and then we're going to slide it. Like that's a good company because they're concerned with how things are shipping. And if they're concerned with how things are shipping, they're probably concerned with the quality of the products that are going in the box too. So that's a pretty good rubric to like, not them. Like it doesn't mean you have a good company, but a bad box getting to you like that is probably a bad company anyway.
Yeah.
If you're shipping a product to a backer in Europe, I guess the invoice for that would show the price that backer paid on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're having something manufactured and you're shipping a bunch of it to a fulfillment center in Europe, how is the VAT being calculated?
So if it is stuff that you already sold and you're just shipping it into there, then the VAT is calculated on the price you sold it for. So it's the same, right? So there's if really ultimately
price to end user.
Someone in Europe is buying it, you pay VAT on whatever price the person in Europe who's buying it paid, right?
If you're shipping a whole bunch of boxes to a fulfillment center, how is that being calculated?
So did
somebody
you
has to receive it. There has to be an agent that receives it.
Yeah.
And that agent is effectively sort of buying it as far as that's concerned.
But they're not. So like, I get where you're getting at. If these are games that you all sold to Kickstarter backers, the VAT is calculated on that price still, no matter what, right? It's no matter what. It's what whoever is getting it in Europe from you paid, right? So if it doesn't matter if someone bought something from you on Kickstarter for $40, but then you're shipping a bunch of $40 things to this fulfillment house that's then going to send them to all of those customers of yours, you still calculate the VAT on the $40 per good, right?
Yeah.
The difference is if you're shipping something to Europe because a wholesaler is buying it from you, like if the wholesaler is buying it at $15 a game, right? And then they're going to actually own the inventory, and then you only get $15 per game, and then they might sell the game later on for $40 a piece or whatever to a European, but that's not your problem. It's out of your hands. You've already made your money. Then you only get charged VAT based on that $15, right, that they paid for.
Which is a way around that is to just say on your Kickstarter, no European backers. Sorry,
Right.
it's too expensive. But contact this company when it's fulfilling. They'll have their stuff. You can buy it from them, but then you're making, because they're going to have their cut taken out anyway. You're going to make less money on it, but you're probably going to have less headache. It's a way around it.
Yeah. So what will happen in Europe then in that situation, by the way, is that you will get charged VAT and then have to charge your wholesale customer VAT based on that $15 per unit, right? So then you have to pay it, but you charge it to them, and they'll pay it back to you. Then they will own all of those goods. Then when they sell them at $40 a piece, they will charge VAT based on the $40 price to their customers, and then claim back the VAT based on $15 that they paid to you, if that makes sense. It's very complicated and so much
If you're
paperwork.
dealing with a company on the other side, you can set the terms so that you never see the back.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
If you're dealing with a company
Yeah.
that has a registration.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Right.
they're willing to do it.
Because ultimately, what's going to happen is the end consumer is going to pay VAT on the end consumer sale price of $40 or whatever. Like that's really what's going to happen no matter what.
It's just
but
whether or
there's
not
like
it's your headache or not.
right, exactly. There's chains of paperwork. Like who ultimately has to force them to pay that is the real question. Does that answer the question? Does that make sense? Cool.
Thank God, because it barely makes sense to us.
So on Kickstarter, can you just say, hey, European $60, and that includes shipping, handling, VAT, like that? I mean,
Well, the thing is, whatever you charge them there, Europe, especially like Germany, for example, like they're getting more and more and more intense about documentation and you proving what your actual sale price was, so you're not committing fraud, you're not lying. So if you charge $60, the all-in price here for this good is $60.
At 40 plus.
It's less a headache for you
Got it.
to itemize it.
Yeah, because otherwise what they'll
charge
do
that
is they'll be
VAT
like,
separately.
you charge $60. Now you got to pay 25% VAT on top of the $60.
You can't be like, no, the VAT's included in that. And be like, that doesn't say it on the paperwork.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about Australia?
Yeah, so Australia is less of a headache.
In some ways, yes.
So
It's certainly not Europe, right?
you might know this. Australia is a really long way away.
It's far away.
So shipping there is very expensive. Like that is just true. Like
It's also a
the-
low density country, population-wise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money to get a thing to Australia, but taxes are a lot more forgiving in our experience.
Yeah.
It used to be that they had a threshold of $1,000, and if it was under $1,000, they didn't charge tax.
I think they lowered
I think
that.
they lowered that,
But we
but I don't
haven't-
remember what it is.
But we haven't hit
It
it.
hasn't come up yet.
Yeah.
If
So-
it's not $100,
Yeah.
we kind of don't care about it because that's not how this industry works.
Right. So they have so for a long time historically Australia had, like I said, like a $1,000 threshold, so you didn't get charged Australian is GST instead of VAT in Australia, but you didn't get charged it. And I think GST is low. Australian GST is lower. I think it's only like 10% or 12% or something like that.
Like
Yeah, on top of it, it's also a lot less money.
Yeah.
It's definitely less money. Because the whole reason that exists is because countries in the EU want to be able to trade with each other to incentivize trading with each other rather than importing everything from outside. Like that's the whole purpose of it. Australia doesn't have that issue because there's no one for them to trade with. They're an island. Like I guess city to city, it's 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
nothing.
But they
You've seen Mad Max. It's
like backtracking to VAT a little bit. VAT, one of the frustrating things about it is it's kind of open to interpretation.
so that.
In a lot of ways, like there's definitely best practices and all of that, but like if you don't have a finicky customs agent, you're never gonna have to worry about it. Australia is a lot more like not having a finicky customs agent
Yeah.
all of the time.
Because they're
They're pretty laid back about
they're
stuff.
Australian. It's cool.
Yeah, they're fine. You're not importing guns. They don't care. Like, for the most part. They're going to be pretty cool about stuff and not just send it back to you at an astronomical price.
Whereas South Americans and Russians are the opposite of cool about stuff.
yeah.
Cool about nothing.
Oh yeah, don't ship anything to South America or Russia because you didn't. You threw it in the ocean because it's actually more likely to get there in a message in a bottle type situation than through any carrier.
Yeah.
It's an exercise of frustration because of how frequently things get returned and or not delivered and not returned.
Or stolen by customs agents.
There's a lot of cool, and then it's gone forever, and then your customer has no recourse, and you just send the thing again if you're nice.
Yep. You had your hand up before.
Yeah, so I'm here from Europe, sorry.
Yeah.
About the bath thing.
I mean, it's not your fault, is it? Because if it is,
Yeah, I'm not responsible, but I still feel sorry. Obviously, we get around it by publishing language books, which there is no, they have zero rating for that. Which
Yes.
is super helpful. Although not books, so PDF sales are not.
Right, yeah. There's 0%. So the VAT for books is different, but it also differs by country. So the VAT, just to follow up on what you're saying, it differs by country for normal goods and for books. The book rate is usually lower unless you're in Denmark. But the VAT rate is 0% for the UK and Ireland and I forget off the top of my head, but not for most countries in continental Europe. It's lower, it's more like 5, 7, 10%, not 20, 25%, except Denmark, where it's 25%, highest book VAT in the world. Anyway.
So my question is more about US state sales taxes.
yeah.
Yes.
It's a nightmare.
We're like the European Union, except all the same country, but with none of the benefits of being all the same country.
So right
A
now,
little bit better.
yeah, that is something that's being sorted out right now, but it is so chaotic that figuring out what the heck you're supposed to do is really, really hard. So for sure, if you are based in a state in the U.S. and you sell to other people in that state, physically in the same state as you, so we're based in Missouri, when we sell to people that are in Missouri, we have to charge Missouri sales tax to them, and then we file that every year with the state of Missouri, and we pay that to the state of Missouri. That's no problem, I got that. We come here to Gen Con.
Oh, that's true whether you're selling online or not.
Yes, whether you're selling online or not.
So if it's coming from our warehouse in Missouri to a person in Missouri and they bought it in our web store,
yeah,
we still have to charge them tax.
Right, so for Kickstarter, our web store, anyone that lives in the state of Missouri in the US, we charge them sales tax, we pay the sales tax based on that. Okay, that's no problem. For Indiana, when we physically are here at Gen Con, we charge sales tax and then pay the state of Indiana that sales tax. And it is looking like we're going to need to, as a consequence, charge sales tax to Indiana residents throughout the year when we do Kickstarter and web store stuff. Okay, that's not so bad. But then there's like a bunch of other laws coming in that are like trying to clarify how it works for other states, and but it's on a state-by-state basis and very confusing. And what some states are moving toward is if you sell above a certain threshold in a year in that state, then you need to register and pay sales tax. But if you don't, then you don't. Other ones are like if you don't have any physical presence in this state, you don't need to charge sales tax.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of trying to figure this out with a bunch of accountants.
I mean, and there's even like some states into are fine, but out of are bad, and yeah, it's impossible to know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry now.
Like
It's impossible to know, and we don't know.
Do you need to be incorporated or have a physical presence in the US in order to be charged state taxes? Like, for example, if we bought a booth to Gen Con next year, would we then be liable for India?
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
Is anybody checking? Probably
It
not.
would probably
Technically, yes.
start with who imported the goods for you. Correct.
Who was the importer of records of record on the goods bringing them in the US?
Okay.
Because that would, you know,
And if it's
who's getting
and if you're
And
doing
if you
it
put it in your
personally, you have to
luggage.
have some sort of work reset or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like not even like.
So when we
you
go to
might
U-
not be the one that's allowed to sell it.
When we go to UK Games Expo, we would have the same problem, so we don't sell things directly to anyone. We instead partner with a retailer that's based in the UK, is VAT registered, they handle all that stuff. They buy all of our games from a wholesaler in the UK, put them in their booth, and then we just pay UK Games Expo for a bunch of space where we set up demos, and then
And it's usually right next to their booth. and
Exactly.
they go,
It
you
looks
buy right
all like
there,
our
it looks-
booth.
It all looks the same. It all
We
looks like
exhibit.
but really, we
They
as a
sell.
US company are not selling anything.
Okay.
Like it's
Not
literally
any
to the point
differently
where
than we
like
normally would.
if
Like,
they
we
needed
normally
help,
sell
I can't go behind the counter and be like, and here's your change, because then I'm selling a thing. Don't do that.
So that's how we get around having to answer. I don't want to have to figure it out, so that's what I do. Because it's a yeah.
You sort of touched on it earlier, but I see on a lot of Kickstarters, people in the backer comments, one complaining about how expensive it is to ship something to Brazil, say.
Yes.
That's because
Well,
it is.
Because it's incredibly expensive to ship things. There's no interstates to Brazil, it being several countries away. And also, nothing gets to Brazil.
Yeah.
There's,
Also, South
there's a
America.
high failure rate
Yeah.
from shipping from the U.S. to
Yeah.
most, if not all, of South America.
And
Yeah.
our carriers know that.
Right. So the trouble with South America in general, there's a few problems. One of them is that the volume of goods is not nearly as high as it is between North America and Europe or Asia. And so you don't get as much economies of scale. And the second issue is that South America, more than any other region in the world, is incredibly protectionist. And so there are two overlapping trade areas in South America, but if you are importing goods from outside of those trade areas, then the taxes and customs duties on them are enormously expensive. And on top of that, there are other restrictions, like for a given individual, there's a certain small number of imports from outside that you can bring in per year. And once you hit that threshold, you're not allowed to get anything else. Sorry.
Like we've had backers complain that we fulfilled the thing early because they were over their threshold for that year, and they asked us to put them at the back of the list so that maybe we could ship it in January, because then they'll actually get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like it also a lot of times won't come back to us. They'll be like, nope, and literally throw it in a dumpster, and it's just
Right.
gone.
So what we do,
And then we don't know what happened to it.
what
and
we
they
do
don't know
on
what happened to
Kickstarter,
it.
and we're real upfront about this, we write it up, we're like, okay, it's incredibly expensive and difficult, and there's a really good chance it won't get to you. We're gonna charge you $60 or $70 per shipping, and we will only do it once, and if it doesn't get to you, we are very sorry, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Like it is so risky and so time consuming. Like we're doing
Yeah.
14,000 parcels out, and 30 of them go to Brazil, and none of them get there. You're like,
And
refund. It's not
there
worth it.
becomes the problem of tracking things at that point, and they're like, "Oh, where's my package then?" And we go, "Well, let me go look for you." And you go and you
Like
get
you
on the
spend an hour
website
or
and
two
look
per
at it.
parcel trying to
But
figure
you
it out.
have to figure out where it is according to the website, but also you have to figure out which shipment it is. If this is the 5th time you've tried.
Right. Tracking anything outside of English-speaking countries and Europe. And I don't say English-speaking countries for any other reason than it's Canada, Australia, and then Europe. It's just kind of impossible to track it. Like every time we ship anything to China, it's gone. It's in the ether, and like most of the time it gets there.
Yeah, China
But,
gets there.
Like it gets there, but like they're like, hey, when? And we're like, nah, I don't know. It said left the United States, and then nothing, just no information.
Yeah.
The local carrier system that big shippers in the U.S. use in different countries is getting better all the time. It's getting better in Europe the fastest.
Right. Well, because Europe already they have an infrastructure of we need to move things from country to country
Well,
because we're tiny and close
and
together.
track
And they're buying companies that are doing
Also
that.
that.
Like they're just, oh, we've
There's-
got enough money, we're just going to buy a company
And
in
there's
Europe
also the volume.
and do that.
I have a question out of anger, but I promise it's a genuine question. How do you balance backer reactions to expectations versus logistical expectations? The context I have for this is I was one of the first 5,000 backers for Greater Than Games for the Sentinels.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of delays which happened, and then when I got it, I could have gotten it cheaper and faster by ordering from Cool Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was shipped to Cool Stuff before an early backer.
Right.
So my question is, how do you balance logistics? Because obviously it made more sense for you guys to ship to the bigger company first.
Right. So that usually doesn't happen. So I think for Oblivion specifically,
Yeah, the
that happened.
collector edition, all of those
Right.
kinds
Did
of
you
stuff.
wind up getting? So there's a really weird edge case that I'm very sorry you fell into if that happened. It must have, because we don't ever ship to the
We are very cautious.
As a
about
policy,
the
don't
order
ship
that we
out.
ship things from
That
our
is
warehouse.
Yeah.
absolutely a thing that we do not do.
Right. So I suspect,
But-
and I'm not sure the details of your situation, but it is likely then that you wound up having your shipment delayed or
Return to us.
returned to us or something, like where an attempt was made first and then we thought we were done, and then started clearing out the warehouse, and then it turns out we weren't done. And for Oblivion, that happened more than anything else.
I'm going to assume you got your Oblivion in October-ish.
I don't remember.
So, that's literally what happened. We wrapped Oblivion shipping last year, our second week of September or so.
Yeah.
And then had this warehouse that was completely unusable because all of the stock is in it, right? So we have to send it out. So it goes to Cool Stuff, Amazon, whatever. And then, because that package was so big, it took forever to process returns. And then October.
Our local post office wouldn't even bring them to us.
They wouldn't bring them. They would just call us and be like, send a truck. Like, literally. Because also all of that was Smart Post, so it's not just FedEx. It goes from FedEx to the post office, but when the return happens, the post office just sends it. So now it's got to go on a post office truck, and that thing was this big. And so 10 of them go on a truck, and they were like, no. And we're like, just give us a list of names, we'll ship it again. Yeah. And then we did, but they weren't even notifying us on time.
Yeah. So there were a lot of problems with that ship out that we've learned a lot of lessons from, so I apologize for that.
But also, our failure rate was actually within our window of these things happen, we have damages and stuff. We were less than 5% failure to deliver rate. But there were 14,000 of you, and that's it. Yeah. I mean, we ran into a lot of problems with that, which was relying on Smart Post at all.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that have been retooled because that shouldn't happen. Okay. Realistically.
Even for this show, we air freighted homebrewers in from China and finished our Kickstarter fulfillment the Friday before Gen Con.
Right. Then came to Gen Con and sold it in Gen Con in person for the first time, and we won't ship to any wholesalers or Cool Stuff or anything until 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You had.
Have you ever considered, if you do Kickstarters in the future, putting a limit on the number of backers, basically having all of your tiers have limits to prevent stuff like you were talking about yesterday with it ended up being $10,000 more than you originally budgeted for, and to try and bring that in?
Well, something actually that we've done that's better, that didn't exist, and the Oblivion Kickstarter that was very big happened back in 2016. And since then, what has happened is that the pledge managers that we use we can put all of the information into the pledge manager, and then after the Kickstarter ends and the Kickstarter information goes into the pledge manager then knows the price and weight and address of every single shipment. And then when we're ready to fulfill it, that can just get sent directly over to our fulfillment software, and it will calculate the shipping rates correctly, it'll calculate VAT correctly and customs information correctly, and get that and make sure that we're always having the most accurate information. And basically, it eliminates the failure rate and means that we can get more accurate charges. It solves a whole bunch of problems, and it didn't exist for the Oblivion Kickstarter. The other thing is, because of that Oblivion Kickstarter, we figured out...
We can't let people play multiple games.
Yeah, exactly. A bunch of volume things that we did wrong that we're not going to do it.
Because we sold a big empty box that was this big, and then had another box on the outside of it, and then some people were like, I want to buy 20. We're like, that's 2 pallets. And it's going to your house.
Yeah.
And now we have to send, we have to send you freight to a residential address. You paid $400 for this thing, and it's going to cost us $800.
Yeah.
Just to get it to you. Minus, not even including our manufacturer. We lost a whole bunch of money on that silly stuff because they just bought too big a number of things.
Yeah. So basically, the short answer is now we have a lot of better ways to estimate what those shipping charges are going to be, because we had this experience of this thing that created a bunch of problems, and now
went very well, and then went, well, we're going to stress test literally everything you do because it went so well.
And so that's at least the same situation that he had. We learned a bunch of things to prevent that from happening again, which is good. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So I have a question. I mean, if you're just starting out with developing a game and you want to kick it off on Kickstarter and you're really, really small, how do you fulfill all this stuff? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot. I mean, limit the markets that you sell to, so you don't, because you're too small. You don't.
I would.
If it's your first game, definitely.
Yeah.
If you're in the U.S., just don't do it. If you're in the U.S., ship in the United States, and you come in, you might be able to get away with Canada. Jodie has a nice rule of thumb, which is
if more than 10% of your backers are international, you didn't charge enough for shipping.
Yeah. If you went, it's the same price to ship to Europe, I'm sorry about your Kickstarter, but it doesn't matter how good it does. You're not going to make any money on it.
Because the demand elsewhere is similar for games here, but it's a lot more
there's
expensive.
There's a
so
lot
the number
of
of people
demand.
who can afford it and who are willing to afford it drops drastically.
Right. And that is a safety measure for you, because there are a lot of very high-profile people who have lost their houses, lost their livelihood because they couldn't not ship a Kickstarter, right? They're liable for this stuff.
This is dipping into a Kickstarter panel we did
Sure.
a few days ago.
It always does.
But when you're setting up a Kickstarter, have a good prototype of your game, like a high-quality prototype that's similar to what the final product is. Find out how much that weighs and how big that is, and then base the shipping on that.
Yeah, and round up.
And also remember, there are a lot of companies around the country and around the world that will do the labor for you, and they're probably going to do it cheaper even than you buying boxes from Uline and bubble wrap from Uline could do it.
Yeah, but
because
Roundup's super important because the price of shipping goes up every year.
Every year.
So if it's going to take you a year to fulfill your game, the price of shipping is going to be more when you ship it than when you estimate it.
Yeah.
And if it is delayed and it takes 2 years or 3 years, it's going to go up significantly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really bit us in the butt with the big Oblivion Kickstarter that they were just talking about was that we sold what Matt describes as a big empty box, basically, to store a bunch of stuff.
Inside of a different box.
And between the time we ran the Kickstarter and fulfilled the Kickstarter, all of the carriers switched to exclusively volumetric shipping, which means that you get penalized for low density items.
So this box weighed 14 pounds.
Right.
But it shipped as though it was 35 pounds.
So
yeah.
What would cost us $10 to $15 to ship in the United States then cost us $35 to $55 to ship in the continental United States. And if it was going to Alaska, it was $110. The one that we had to ship to Alaska was $110.
Yeah, so
for a product that cost $60.
Right, so we ran into those kind of problems. We ran into then, because it was so big, we ran into problems with returns not being processed correctly, and then we wound up with problems with things not getting to people until they were already available at retail, which is bad, and there was a lot of problems there. So we wound up, on shipping alone, we wound up spending an extra $100,000 that we hadn't budgeted.
Yeah.
Right, on shipping.
And most of that was just shipping prices changed in those 2 years. Right. Yeah. And a lot of those were very low margin products to begin with.
Yeah.
Like as stretch goals tend to be, they're lower margin because they're the thing that you want to do because it's cool, but you're not gonna just do unless you hit a certain point because you can't afford to. And then when shipping prices go through the roof or those things are physically large, I have a feeling that as these shipping prices go up, you're going to stop seeing the unnecessary 12 by 12 box. The unnecessary 12 by 12 by 3.5 inch box that every game comes in is going to shrink way down. The number of games that are in that is going to be exclusively the games that need that much space for storage because the shipping rates are going through the roof and volumetric shipping is very expensive. So before they could get away with, oh, it's this giant box, there's a deck of cards in it, and that's it. Maybe some punch boards, and that's it. There's room for expansion. I don't think you're going to see that much in the future. In the next 10 years or so, that's going to be a thing of the past.
Just make your packages small.
I mean, that's always to your benefit, especially if it's your first thing. Make your box as small and tight as it can possibly be. There's not room for expansions, but, it's your first one. You'll get there. Until you can guarantee that you can afford that extra shipping, but also, it's not just shipping out to customers, it's importing. If you're air freighting, you're paying by the pallet. If you're freighting, you're paying by the pallet. If you're not shipping containers, you're gonna pay whatever you're gonna pay for containers, if it's full or not, if it's your container. And the same thing goes for volume load, anything larger than LTL that's not containerized. It kind of costs the same to send 7 pallets as it does to send 20 pallets.
Unless you're making a game that's particularly dense, you're going to be paying more than the weight of your game to ship your game.
Almost certainly. Board games have a really hard time meeting the volume to density crossover.
If it's purely a pack of cards, it'll be,
You'll hit it.
it'll be,
Yeah,
no
Packet-
problem.
it'll be about.
Yeah, books are fine.
Books
yeah.
are fine,
Right.
but also books you get into the lovely.
Books are the best.
Be
Oh.
very specific and read all of the rules on what media mail is.
Yeah.
Because media mail is very cheap.
Learn about media mail.
But-
They
but
are a
they
lot
are
of
very
rules for
strict
what
rules.
qualifies and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Because if
Right.
you don't qualify, it's going to be like 5 times as much to ship a thing.
But if you're able to use that, if that fits the product you're trying to make, use that. It takes longer, but it's significantly cheaper. It's about 50 cents per pound.
So if your game's gonna have books but custom dice, is it sometimes better to send the
Oh,
books as media
almost
mail
certainly.
and then send the dice out as a separate?
Because the dice, if it's a small enough pack, might be able to just go in like a USPS envelope.
Yeah, you put it in
mailer.
a, put in a bubble mailer from Uline that costs you 50 cents, and you pay by weight on that, and it's going to cost you like another $3 or $4 to ship it.
So then
They'll be really
I
cheap.
mean,
They're really light.
If you ship that through the post office, also that's going to cost you probably $1 or $1.50 in postage, depending on how many dice are in there.
Right. Like if it's
But if
a
you
standard
ship
like RPG 7 dice, like
But if it's under a
Send
pound,
that
it can
book
go
separate.
first class mail, and if it can go first class mail, it's very cheap to ship that way.
So your customers will get 2 packages and the email thing, and then the dice can come.
let them know they're going to get 2 packages. That's important.
Yeah.
Send them to, tracking numbers. Like, make sure that they are aware they're going to get 2 packages. There's a thing, we are going to be releasing a book soon, and there's a bunch of other stuff, and then there's going to be the book box and then the other stuff. Also, because books tend not to be the same shape as the other things you're packaging with them. Like, remember, like, oh, I have a book, so I need an 8.5 by 11 box by whatever height. And then you put a pack of dice in there, and now you're paying for all this extra volume, but you're only using this tiny corner. And then the packing material in there. And also those dice are going to destroy your books. You're going to get a bunch of returns and complaints. So, like, yeah, just ship it separately. It's just easier for you. It's easier for you. It's better for the customer. It's better for your product. Yeah.
Other questions?
Anybody else? Perfect timing. Look at this. Cool.
All right.
Did
Thank you
all-
very much.
Did you all fall asleep? Have a good night. Good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.